Zach is back. It's the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
All right, welcome back in. Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. Number, as always, 609-919-9200. We come to you today, as always, from the Princeton Orthopedic Associates Studios, getting you ready for Game 6 tonight at Madison Square Garden between the Rangers and the Ottawa Senators. Rangers look to force a Game 7. And then also in the Stanley Cup Playoffs, we have 2 Game 7s tomorrow night. So now joining us is the head coach of the San Jose Sharks. And that, of course, is the former Devils coach, and Peter DeBoer, who's kind enough to hop on board with us. Coach, always great to talk to you. Appreciate a few minutes. And how are you?
I'm great, Zach. Always nice catching up with you, too.
Well, it's always great to have you on, and we do appreciate it today. Let's first just look back so far in your career. You've taken 2 teams to the Stanley Cup Final. We saw it here in New Jersey and then also with San Jose last year. And both those years, it was your first year on the job with those respective organizations. When you look back and you see what you accomplished with those 2 teams in your first year, just what memories come back to mind?
Well, nothing but great memories. I mean, and both trips were so different. The New Jersey one, obviously, coming here from Florida where we hadn't had a lot of success. It was my first NHL job, and getting a chance to coach that group of men and, the run we went on there, obviously beating the Rangers was special. Living in the area, I had no idea the Rangers-Devils rivalry and the passion of the fans on both sides of the fence. It was really special to be a part of, and obviously anytime you get that far and lose, and the run with New Jersey, it was to LA in the final, and last year with San Jose, it was the Pittsburgh Penguins. But both really special in totally different ways, and when you go on those type of journeys, you always appreciate them because you know how tough they are to get that far.
Like you said, it's always tough to get that far, and you're a few plays away from winning a Stanley Cup Final and having that on your resume. Just to do it in your first year, though, does it make it a little bit more tougher since that's your first year on the job?
Yeah, absolutely. I wish in both situations I had signed 1-year contracts. If I had known that, I would have had some pretty good leverage at that point. I think it's always tough to follow that type of season. I think history shows, especially recently, that teams that either win or go to the finals have a really hard time of getting back there again the following year. It takes so much out of you, and I think this year, particularly with San Jose, you combine that. We had 7 players at the World Cup to start the season, and the short summer and the late playoff run, and a little bit of an older team in both situations in New Jersey that first year and this year. It shows you how tough it is. The Jersey situation was a little different. We had Zach Parise leave the summer following our run, and Kovalchuk, eventually left the year following. So, you lose a couple of pieces in the next 12 months that really put us in a tough spot.
Coach, we talk about veterans, and we always know teams that get this far, they have a mix of veterans and also youngsters, and you have one of the best veterans in the game in Joe Thornton, and I know he's going to be a free agent, but to see what Joe did in the playoffs, especially playing with the ACL and MCL, we always know hockey guys are going to play, and they're as tough as could be. Just how about the performance from your leader in Joe Thornton?
Yeah, I've never seen anything like it. I've seen a lot of courageous efforts, a lot of courageous men that I've coached that have played through injuries and different things to get back out there for us. And but I've never seen anything like this. This is a 37-year-old, which first ballot Hall of Famer that really it would have been easy for him to just call it a season after, like I said, the long run in the World Cup and the season and that he got out there essentially on one leg. When you tear your ACL and MCL, your knee's essentially floating there, and there's a lot of instability, and it's very uncomfortable, obviously. And see him limp into the rink and then find a way to get on the ice for I think 4 of the 6 games in the first round against Edmonton was pretty amazing to be a part of.
Pete DeBoer with us right now. Coach, we'll get to the Rangers in just a second as we get you ready for their Game 6 tonight. You know Edmonton very well, being in your division and playing them in the first round. Same goes with Anaheim, them being your division as well. But you look at the youngsters for Edmonton, McDavid, who's been a superstar. We all know that. 30 goals and 70 assists in the regular season. And Leon Draisaitl also adds in 29 goals and 48 assists. Since you've had to do it in the past and prepare for this Edmonton team very recently, how the heck do you prepare for those youngsters?
Well, it's tough. They're obviously McDavid's, in my mind, the most dynamic player in the league, and Draisaitl, might be, one of the top, 5 most complete 200-foot players in the league in the mold of a, Taves or a Kopitar. So, it creates tough mismatches. But, let's be honest, they paid a price to get those guys. That's 10 years of picking high in the draft, and, you don't get those guys unless you're picking 1 or 2 or 3 overall. And, they paid a heavy price over the last decade to get the opportunity to get those guys, and now they're coming into their own, and they're reaping the benefits of that.
With Game 7 tomorrow night between the Ducks and the Oilers, give me a thought about it. What do you look for? What do you think are the keys to that one?
Well, boy, what a great matchup. I think in my mind, the Ducks were the best team, mainly in the NHL, over the last 2 months of the season. They really took their game to another level. So, I know the history of the last 4 or 5 years in Game 7s, and especially at home. But I really believe they'll buck that trend this year. I think they're just too deep, and there's too much veteran leadership there. And Getzlaf's playing at too high a level that I think it's going to be a tough ask for Edmonton. But either way, you know what? I think either team would be a real worthy representative against Nashville in the Western Conference Final, and should be a great one.
We talk a lot about the mental aspect of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and we'll get to Washington later. You just mentioned it with the Ducks, but here locally with the Rangers, this has now been 3 times in this postseason that they've had a lead late, and they've not been able to slam the door on it and walk out with the victory, once in Montreal and now twice in this series versus Ottawa. As a coach, when you have things that occur a few times in a series or a few times in a postseason, how do you not let that get inside your player's head?
It's tough, and anytime you blow a lead, we did in Game 5. The series with Edmonton was 2-2, and we had a lead into the last 2 minutes of Game 5, and blew that lead and lost in overtime, and really changed the momentum of the series. So, I don't think there's a coach out there that isn't trying to do the right things and message the proper way in those situations. A lot of time it comes down to how experienced your team is, what kind of leadership you get, and obviously big saves at the right time too are always critical. But it is tough when the momentum swings in those situations. It's really tough to get it back, and I think the Rangers had an exceptional year. They really rebuilt that team on the fly compared to where it was when I was in New Jersey here just a few short years ago, and they're one of the fastest teams in the league, and they're great to watch.
AV's done a really remarkable job because, like you were saying, I didn't expect the Rangers really to be at this point, and you just see how they've rebuilt the franchise, specifically, in a time where they're used to just going to the Stanley Cup playoffs and going on these long runs, and they have a chance to go on another long run this year, but you got to win tonight. The coach, though, even though I like him a lot, he's faced a lot of scrutiny for some of these late-game collapses, specifically not having Brady Shea on the ice. Just can you give us a little bit on that perspective when you are a coach and you have a lot of veterans that are aging a little bit, and how you mix them in with the young, successful players, especially in late-game scenarios that AV has struggled with?
Yeah, well, you know what? It's funny. I when I talk about the passion of the New York area fans, I giggle a little bit because it's always got to be somebody's fault why you're losing, and usually the coach takes the brunt of that. I've been on the end of that, but those are tough calls. I think experience is a huge factor in the playoffs, and that composure to. I've been here, done this before. There's some great young players in this league, but you can't replicate experience. And it's always easy to second guess and say this guy should have been out there or that guy should have been out there had they when they lose, when they win, those guys, guys like AV don't get enough credit for having the right people on the ice, at key times. And usually those are the experienced guys this time of year.
Wrapping up with Pete DeBoer, who joins us right now on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920, the Jersey. Lundqvist was not great in that game number 5, and you expect him to bounce back tonight, right?
Well, he has a history of doing that. He's a big game player. I've seen that firsthand, and his competitiveness is second to none. And he's going to be dialed in for the next game. And if you're playing in a game 7, that's the kind of guy you want in your team.
Pete, I knew you were talking about the rivalry between the Rangers and the Devils, and we've seen Lundqvist and Brodeur go at it, and they've been some spectacular games. Just with your time with Marty, what were you able to learn from one of the all-time great goaltenders the game has ever seen?
Well, the thing that always amazed me about Marty, and again, I had him as a 40-year-old starting goalie, so he was past his prime. But his ability to raise his level at key times, just looking back at that playoff series, we had Florida in the first round and won Game 7 in double overtime, and he was our best player, through that overtime to give us a chance to advance. We played, obviously in Philly in the second round and in a tough environment and as tough a rink as you can go in, and he went in there and won on the road a Game 6 to close them out. And then obviously the conference finals against Lundqvist, and there was key moments at different times in that series where he made some huge saves and really turned back the clock. So that's what I remember about Marty, his ability to raise his level. And again, I had him not even close to his prime. When he was in his prime, he was in a different world.
It's funny that you say that, because I think the first time I actually interviewed you, we were talking about a potential goalie controversy with Marty, and some people were wondering if he was going to continue out the year. I look back at that, and you just have to chuckle at it.
Yeah, exactly. I do remember that time, and we had a little bit of a slow start to that season, but he got himself rolling, and the rest is history here. I see the Devils are in a rebuild, and it was nice to see them get the first overall pick, and there's some bright days ahead down the road here too.
Coach, for so many years in the Devils organization, it was Lou Lamoriello and Marty Brodeur, and now times have definitely been changing with Lou now being in Toronto and Marty no longer playing. I'll ask you the same thing that I asked you about Marty, just because I know when you got fired by the Devils that you talked about how much fun it was to work with Lou Lamoriello. Just what made that relationship so special, and what were you able to learn from one of the great hockey minds in Lou Lamoriello?
Well, a couple things. Marty still is in the game and making an impact in St. Louis. He did an excellent job there this year with their goaltending and, getting that put in the right direction. I think he played a big part in that, and they had a great year there. And as far as working for Lou, it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience until you're around him every day, listening to his stories and taking the tidbits that he offers you. You don't realize, how smart a man this is, and how educated, how classy, all those things. So, it was a great run here, and I learned an awful lot. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Coach, before we let you run, let's just look at Pittsburgh and then also the Capitals. I thought this series was over when it was 3-1, just knowing the history of Washington and their performance in the postseason. Definitely surprised last night by the performance of Pittsburgh and not really showing up in that game. When you look at Game 7, if Pittsburgh, and when momentum is clearly shifted in this series, is going to want to turn it around, how do they do that in this Game 7?
Well, I don't think you have to look any further than your best players, and Pittsburgh has some guys there that have carried them. Really what they've done this year without Letang in the lineup has been incredible. It'd be comparable to us taking Burns out of the lineup or Ottawa taking Carlson out. It's a huge piece, and for them to still be in the position they're in and fighting is, I think, a testament to their depth and what their coaches have done there. But you get to a Game 7 like this, you don't have to look any further than Sidney Crosby, and I expect he'll be the best player on the ice in Game 7, and Washington will have their hands full trying to close him out.
We've talked about every team besides the one team that has advanced so far to the Western Conference Final, and that is Nashville. You look at Peter Laviolette, just as a coach that's in this league right now, and Peter, got the Islanders to 2 playoffs, and also then got the Flyers to the Stanley Cup Playoffs, the final, and you also saw him win the Stanley Cup with Carolina. Now just doing a remarkable job with Nashville. Just when you look at a Peter and Peter Laviolette, what makes him such a great coach that each year he seems to find the team in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Yeah, I don't think that's an accident. I think his teams play hard. They've got good structure. He has a way of getting their emotional levels to the right place in the playoffs. And I've had the fortune of coaching against him when he was in Philadelphia, when I was here in New Jersey on our run, and also last year we beat them in Game 7 in the second round with San Jose. But until we hit Pittsburgh, I thought Nashville was the best team we had seen, and I'm not surprised they're making another run here this year.
What makes them so good? Because some people saw this run coming as an 8 seed, and then some people just said, "Oh, they're an 8 seed; they wouldn't advance so far."
Well, I think it starts with their defense. 1 through 5, I don't think there's a better defense core in the league. And when Picarine is playing at the level he's capable of playing at, which has been, the entire last couple months of the season and into the playoffs, it's a tough group to get any type of sustained pressure on. So I think it really starts and ends there. And they're rolling. They'll be a tough out for somebody.
And Coach, before we let you run, I just saw something interesting happen over the weekend on the World Championships where Gudas actually punched Giroux, and they're teammates of the Flyers, and Giroux is the captain of the Flyers. And that was your 2 players. What would your reaction be to that, Coach?
Well, I love it. I think that's what separates great players. I think they're going to compete against each other no matter what. I look at the Stahl brothers and how hard they play against each other on the ice. There are no friends once you drop that puck and you're on different teams, so I think that's great stuff.
Well, Coach, we appreciate the time as always. Thanks so much. Let's do it again real soon.
Thanks, Zach. Take care.